Verse number 10.
Deuteronomy chapter 20 verse 10.
When you go to attack a city,
When you go to, there's not 71st. When you go to attack a city, first,
give its people a chance to surrender.
give its people a chance to surrender. Is it your town? Is the town yours? The God of the Bible says, go and attack them. Now give them time to surrender.
If they open the gate,
and
surrender, they are out to become your slaves.
They are out to become your slaves
and do forced labor for you.
In this 21st century, who endorses slavery and hard labor on his brother? Please, this God of the Bible is endorsing slavery and forcing people to do hard labor. This same God of the Bible says he had pity on the nation of Israel because they were slaves in Egypt and they were doing forced labor. Why are you telling the same people to go and do the same thing to other nations? Injustice. Now continue.
But if the people of that city will not surrender,
now the God of the Bible told the Jewish people that if the people of that town will not surrender
but choose to fight, surround it with your army.
Then
when the Lord your God lets you capture the city,
now the Lord your God will let you capture the city.
Kill everyone in it.
Abba, what is this? Kill everybody in it. Continue.
You may, however, take for yourselves and the women.
Kill the men, then the women there. Keep the women for yourselves. The same thing in Islam. Keep the women for yourself. People are continue.
The children.
Keep the women and the children.
The livestock.
The livestock, they keep them.
And everything else in the city. You may use everything that belongs to your enemies. That the Lord has given it to you.
That the Lord your God. What kind of God will send his people to go and commit genocide, steal from the people, take their children and take their women?
Hi guys, Success here, correcting biblical misconception. Now guys, I went to read Deutronomy 20, the whole chapter. There is something that I said when I was teaching about how to read the Bible for better understanding. You do not just isolate a verse for a debate. That verse came from a chapter. So the best you can do yourself is to read the whole chapter. It's just like you are discussing with somebody and somebody took one sentence or a few sentences out of the whole discussion and start using it for debate, not understanding what made that sentence, what brought the sentence, where the sentence is heading to. It makes no logical reasoning. The same way it makes no biblical reasoning for you to just isolate few verses from a chapter for discussion or for debate. It only makes you sound biblically dumb or ignorant, as in this case. Now, I went to read Deuteronomy chapter 20 so that I can be able to understand where he's coming from. Now, after reading Deuteronomy 20 verse from verse 1 to the end, from verse 17 and verse 18, anybody who can read the Bible for understanding can understand that whole chapter from verse 17 and verse 18, you will get the whole essence of that whole chapter. So now, in that Deuteronomy chapter 20, God was using Israel, was giving them instructions on how to win a fight. He was using Israel to bring judgment upon neighboring nations that have consistently chose to be ungodly and evil. So he was even saying that who we say in this 21st century, there is nowhere in the Bible that Jesus said, or is asking people to go back and replicate what have happened there now. You need to understand that the biblical times recorded people's life in an era. Not everything in the Bible. I told you that the Bible is prescriptive and descriptive. There is what the Bible is describing, as in people's storyline, people's life experience, and there is what the Bible is approving, prescribing for us to do. So nobody is asking you in 2026 now to go and do what? Take down a nation. No, God will not give anybody such instruction. At least if you want to argue intelligibly. You do not just speak one verses or few verses for debate and start, my God. If you want to understand how to read the Bible, to be able to understand, I will put a clip of the video I made so you can, if you care, you can search on it and listen. You do not just do this, guys. You do not, like the example I gave, it's just like you discussing with somebody and somebody heard maybe few sentences from the discussion and took it and start clamoring on it. It makes no logical reasoning. It makes no sense. Because you don't know where this conversation is starting from, you don't know where it's going, where it's continuing, or where it's going. That is how it also is biblically. So you have to read the whole chapter. Sometimes you even have to read other chapters before it and after it to be able to have a contextual understanding, a better, a wholesome, a balanced contextual understanding before you pick any verse for debate. And I went to read that 20, and when you read that Deuteronomy 20 from verse 17 and 18, it will give you a perfect understanding of what that Deuteronomy 20 is all about. Now, for those that will not be able to go back and read Deuteronomy 20, let me just give you a summarized understanding of Deuteronomy 20. Now, from verse Deuteronomy 1 to verse 4, we see that God was trying to make Israel understand that victory is dependent on him and not just on their military. That means victory is dependent on God and not just on their strength. From verse 5 to 9, we see that certain people could go home. That is, God was showing consideration for certain people and maybe their morale or their mindset. And these are the set of people. Someone who built a new house, someone who built a new vineyard, someone who just got engaged, or someone who was fearful. This was God showing consideration to the lives of these people, that instead of them fighting, they should go home. Do you understand? From verse 10 to 15, this was for cities far away. God was telling them that they should offer peace first whenever they go into their faraway cities. If the city accepted the peace that Israel brought, they become subject to Israel. But if the city choose to fight them, then Israel should battle them. So the main idea here is that peace was offered first before war, or peace was preferred before war. Verse 16 and 18, this is where God told them not to spare anyone, and the reason was so that they will not teach the Israelites how to practice their abominable ways. So God told them, do not spare anyone, because those nations were involved in practices that God calls evil, deeply evil, ungodly, immoral, name whatever you want to name it. And those practices that God was preventing Israel to adopt from, that these neighboring cities were practicing, include child sacrifice, idol worship, extreme moral corruption. So biblically, Deuteronomy 20 from verse 1 to end, when you study it holistically, God was using Israel as a nation, as at that time, that era, to bring what? Divine judgment upon the neighboring Canaanite cities that have been consistently doing evil, consistently doing corrupt activities. Another thing you also need to have at the back of your mind is that the same Bible later shows that Israel itself was judged by God when they became corrupt. So the standard is not that God was using Israel to judge other nations and Israel can do anything that they like. No. Even when Israel as a nation, they became corrupt, even when Israel as a nation consistently kept doing evil and abominable things before God, God also rendered divine judgment upon them. So if you read Jeremiah, you read 2 Kings, these biblical books also attested to Israel being conquered and subjugated too for being corrupt and going against God's pattern. So it is God using one nation as a judge, as a tool of judgment upon another nation who have consistently chosen to be evil and corrupt. So Deuteronomy 20 was not all about God being wicked or committing genocide or God being selfish or whatever name that they call it. It was not even all about just territorial expansion. It was God using Israel as a tool to render divine judgment to their neighboring Canaanite nation that have consistently kept on doing abominable things, being corrupt, doing things that are evil. And God uses Israel as a tool to bring divine judgment upon them. So we see God giving them those laws He was giving them was how for them to be able to win over that nation with the better purpose is bringing divine judgment upon them. And we also see later in the Bible, like 2 Kings and Jeremiah, Israel too was also conquered. When Israel chose to become evil and do the things that were against God's will, God also used other neighboring nations to conquer them, subdue them, and bring divine judgment upon them. Do you understand? Bye, guys.